We're back in the general New Orleans area. Actually, we're on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain across the big lake from New Orleans. And with me today is Dr. Ivor van Heerden, Deputy Director of the LSU Hurricane Center. And I would imagine the last 2 years for you have been a prophet vindicated?
Yeah, but there's no joy in that. You know, something as serious as this, there's no joy in getting it right. You know.
When you say getting it right, all the predictions beforehand, did they envision the weakness of the levee system, or were they about just the effects of a hurricane?
Most of our research had been looking at a major hurricane, one that flooded the city. And while we couldn't model the failure of the levees, the work that we did for a flooded city became very applicable once the levees failed and we flooded the city. We always had concerns about the levees because we had seen some sections that were bowed. But in trying to get information from the Corps, their response was these were built to federal standards and they're not going to fail. So the only thing we didn't predict was the failed response from the federal government.
And there'd been a sort of a dress rehearsal just the year before, right? Hurricane Pam?
Yeah, Hurricane Pam in 2004, it looked at a scenario of a slow-moving Category 3 storm that flooded the whole city.
And that was a full-scale dress rehearsal of all emergency response?
Yes, there were probably well over 100 people there from all the different agencies, federal and state, local government emergency managers. And the whole idea was to look at how you would deal with a scenario like a completely flooded New Orleans, you know, with 60,000 people dead, 300,000 trapped. Unfortunately, it never went to the second phase. So all that we saw was draft plans developed. A lot of issues weren't fully explored. Certainly sheltering for the homeless, sheltering for those who didn't have motor vehicles, nursing homes, those sorts of issues, hospitals weren't fully addressed.
Any idea why not?
I don't know, because, you know, we at LSU were pretty much cut out of the process. All I know is we got a CD and, you know, a lot of sections were blank, just, you know, with to be determined or to be so-and-so.
When we talk about the last 2 years, what's it been like personally for you at watching the response to this disaster? Do you feel as though lessons have been learned and appropriate steps have been taken to look to the future of this area?
Well, I think the lesson that we in Louisiana have learned is that you can't trust the federal government. The federal government failed the response. The federal government has failed to own up to the fact that it was their levees that failed. And they're responsible for the damage, and they're responsible for the deaths. And they made all these promises, especially the White House, about monies for response, but we haven't seen it. I don't know if it's because we had a Democratic governor and a female governor, or it's because it's Louisiana and we don't count much in the overall scheme of things. You know, it's very significant to us that President Bush always refers to us as those people in that part of the world, or words very similar. And I think the lesson for the rest of the country is don't depend on the federal government, because they will fail you.
Next time we're with Dr. Ivor van Heerden, our boat trip takes us to the wetlands, the future of New Orleans.